Picture this, me, but I'm 11. I'm at a friend's house with a couple of buddies, and they have this super sweet community pool right down the street from them. It's got a water slide, a really lazy, underpaid teenage lifeguard, but most importantly, a huge, I'm talking 3-story high diving board. So their family is kind enough to take me to this super awesome community pool. And at this point in my life, I had never actually seen with my own eyes a real diving board. What I have seen are the Olympics, where people do crazy flips and stuff off that thing. So naturally, I want to try it. We get to the pool, and my friends rush to the cool water slide they have, but I am eyeballing this diving board. I still have to change though because, well, I'm not dressed for the pool yet. So I left my shoes with everyone's stuff, and I go to the little locker room thing they have. You know, the pool locker rooms that are super, super clean. The ones where you don't need shoes because you could eat off that floor. The locker rooms that you can't stand in one place for too long in, or else the floor will claim you as its own because the locker room sits comfortably in the center of the pool water and body fluid Venn diagram. Yeah, so anyway, I went in without shoes on because it's way easier to change pants that way. And needless to say, it was disgusting in there. And there was 100% chance I got some weird disease that day, but it didn't matter. I was so focused on that diving board. I was visualizing myself hitting the craziest flips of all time off that thing. I didn't even notice the soggy band-aid that crawled up my foot, or the fact that I already somehow had a short curly hair in my mouth. Literally nothing else mattered. I was gonna do the most insane trick off that diving board and wow every single person at that pool. Hey kid, we don't normally give awards to random pool goers, but we saw your absolutely bodacious megalodonkus triple Tonka truck you did, and we've decided to give you this check for $1 million bajillion. Oh yeah, I was ready to make my dream a reality. But I had to leave the locker room first. Legitimately, this is not the point of the story, but it's worth mentioning because I remember so vividly how harshly that floor clung to my bare feet. It was holding on tighter than that one ceiling fan at your grandmother's house. And since I didn't have my shoes, my bare grippers were somehow intertwined with the locker room floor. I won't bore you with the details on how I escaped, but the point is, I got out of there, and I didn't even care. My mind was solely on that X Games mode diving board. As I got in line, my friends were like, "Dude, you coming to the slide?" And I was like, "Nah, I'm just doing the diving board, you know, like an adult." I was super confident because the guys on the Olympics made it seem so easy. How hard could it possibly be? It's like a trampoline over water, so A, there's no chance of hurting yourself because it's water. 2, this thing probably bounces you so high. And D, all I gotta do is tuck. This is gonna be so easy. One after another, kids went off the diving board, just jumping straight off, no flips or anything. And I was like, psh, bunch of wusses. And finally, it was my turn to climb the ladder. Immediately, everything in my brain just went completely out the window. All the hotshot flips just dissolved from my mind as I started climbing this enormous ladder. It's like when you're in line to order food somewhere as a little kid and your mom leaves for just a minute to go do something and you get up to the front of the line and the cashier's looking at you and you have no idea what you're doing, so you start crying. And that's what this experience was like because I was thinking so much about how easy the flips were gonna be and how cool I was gonna look, but I didn't actually think at all of how I was gonna do these flips and what jumping off this 3-story diving board would feel like. In all honesty, the diving board was probably like 8 feet high, but as an 11-year-old, it felt like Mount Vesuvius, so I was peeing my pants. I'm up there, I can see the whole park, my house, and a couple of the 7 wonders. And I'm getting a little nervous, but there's a ton of kids in line behind me ready to jump off this thing, so I had to do something, and I couldn't just jump off because I didn't want to look like a little baby. So I slowly started moving towards the edge of the diving board. I swallowed my fear, and I geared up for the biggest front flip of my entire life. I started booking it to the end of the diving board as fast as I could. I don't know if you've ever been on a diving board, but you're not supposed to run and jump off like that because it bends. So I got real unstable real quick. I ended up falling forward, scraping my ankle on the edge of the board, and absolutely flopping into the water. It wasn't quite a belly flop, but it wasn't pretty either. I'm getting out of the pool, trying to look tough, and I start limping over to where our stuff was at. Tried to avoid the lifeguard because I thought if he saw my ankle, he wouldn't let me get back in the water. So I'm sneaking past him. Hey kid, no running. Yeah, the lifeguard didn't care at all. But this was a good thing though, because I ain't no quitter. That means I could try as many times as I wanted and the lifeguard wouldn't care if I hurt myself. Yeah, in hindsight, I was a little confused, but I got spirit. Don't ever try dumb stuff like this, especially if the only person who's in charge doesn't care. Anyway, I splashed my face with the kiddie pool water. That way people wouldn't know I'd been crying. They would just think my face is wet, right? I went back to the diving board. This time, before getting in line, I studied the kids that went before me. I was looking at what made some kids launch higher than others. I studied how their feet were positioned when they jumped off. And finally, after some good prepping, I got back in line. And I started to visualize how it would look like from up there, what the board would feel like. Because it wasn't about the glory of Rome anymore. It was about proving to myself that I could do it. I climbed up the ladder for what seemed like ages. When I finally reached the top, I started working up the courage to go towards the end of the diving board. This time, instead of just sprinting, I stood on the end, I gave it a proper bounce, and I made it. I mean, it wasn't pretty, but I made it. And I know it was just a measly front flip, but I felt like I could do anything. I went off the diving board a few more times after that, and I got better with every single flip. I was starting to land perfectly in the water every time. I was getting a little too confident. And right when I was really feeling like the big cheese, my friend's dad starts calling me over from his sun chair. He had a super good view of the pool, so I was sure he saw my front flip. Sure enough, as I walked towards him, he was like, "I saw your front flip." I knew it. And I was like, oh, that was nothing. And he was like, oh yeah? Yeah, I could do those in my sleep now. You know, because I had that kid confidence at that point. Kids are so confident, they'll do something one time and they'll say they're a professional at it. They'll say whatever's on their mind at any given moment. You want someone to break the world record for how many foldable chairs can be carried across the room at church? Ask a kid. You want an honest opinion on do these pants make you look fat? Ask a kid. Anyway, so I was like, yeah, that front flip was so easy, why? And he was like, so you're saying you want a challenge? Yeah, I can do anything. Do you know who you're talking to? And he was like, okay, so you can do the front flip, right? Easy. Right, so this time, you should try to over-rotate, miss your feet, and do a dive. Almost like a double? Yeah. I know to some of you guys who did gymnastics or even competitive diving or anything, you're like, a front flip dive is literally the most basic move on the planet. Great, nice. Yeah, the view's probably a little foggy from your high horse up there, so you should probably step down because the oxygen's thin. You're probably getting a little lightheaded and forgetting that I was 11. I had never attempted to do a double front flip in my life, and any sort of double flip seemed physically impossible at that time. But I mean, I wasn't about to back down from a challenge. Are you kidding? Everyone knows when you're a kid and someone challenges you to do something, it is life or death that you give it your best shot. So I was like, okay. And I started marching right up to that diving board. There wasn't a line at this point, so I didn't really have time to visualize, but Leo from the Ninja Turtles once said on Saturday morning cartoons that the only way to learn is by doing. And then he sliced a piece of pizza in half or something. So there was no way I was gonna let this man and Leonardo down. So I started climbing the ladder, and it seemed slightly less tall this time. I was beginning to believe, and I put all my training from my previous front flips into practice. I came to the diving board. Since I was a pro at this point, I didn't hesitate. I jumped into the diving board strong, and I pulled the highest front flip I've ever done. It was happening. I was doing it. Now I just need to open up at the perfect time and... To this day, that first try was one of the hardest belly flops I have ever done. I saw red when I hit the water because not only was I high in the air off the diving board, but I was also rotating forward, which made the smack 10 times worse. It was so bad that the lifeguard actually looked up at me and was like, "You okay?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, no, I'm awesome." But I was not, in fact. awesome. I went back to my friend's dad and he was like, dude, nice. And he gave me a high five. And then he was like, you almost had it. This time, you just gotta let yourself roll forward just a little bit more into the dive. And I was like, duh, of course. So before the pain even wore off, I got back in line at the diving board. And before I knew it, I was at the top again, looking at France since I could see it from up there. I started thinking, roll forward, roll forward, roll forward. I got this. I went up to the edge, I got the biggest jump I could again, and somehow I smacked almost harder than the first time, and it hurt twice as bad because I hadn't even recovered yet from the first flop. But I tell you, I was stubborn. I'm not kidding you when I say I tried 4 more times after that. And I'm also not kidding when I tell you I smacked 4 more times after that. And guess what? It was the same spot on my stomach and chest, over and over and over again. But I was determined to get this move down. I only paused after 4 attempts because I genuinely started not being able to see straight. So for the first time in my 11-year-old life, I sat in a sun chair next to a pool instead of playing in it. First of all, I was in immeasurable pain. And second of all, sitting there was boring as heck. I have no idea how moms and teenagers who think they're adults can just sit next to any body of water and just tan, but that's besides the point. I legit had to sit there for like 15 minutes just letting the pain calm down. And my torso was redder than a boiled lobster. But I wasn't about to give up. So I started to get up and no. The pain was still really bad. So I waited like 5 minutes and then I started to get up and the pain was still ever present, but this time it was bearable. I was basically on 1 HP and I knew if I took one more hit from that pool in the same spot, I was done for. So I started walking up to the diving board. And by this time, everyone was watching. The lifeguard, all the teenagers who think they're adults suntanning, and most importantly, my friend's dad, who to be honest, was very encouraging, but might have enjoyed watching me smack over and over. But none of that mattered anymore. This was between me and the pool, and I had a score to settle. So finally, I mustered up all the strength I had left. And one last time, I'd put more than everything I had into that diving board. I got the biggest air out of any of my flips yet, and I tucked as hard as I could, and this time, that was it. I was done. I might have even thrown up afterward because the pain was so bad, but it's hard to remember. I went home defeated that day, and I couldn't sleep on my stomach for a week. But you know how I said I'm not a quitter? Well, you'll be happy to know that years later, when I was 16, I was at this place called Art Sports in Colorado. And they have this cool trampoline thing that launches you into a foam pit. And it was there that I learned how to not only do a front flip dive, but also a double front flip and even the beginnings of a triple. The moral of the story is don't ever give up on something. Only put it on hold till you can come back stronger, which is more than I did for this video, which is about my horrible college experience. Thanks for watching.